Up here on the Farm Bureau guest line, check out favorites.com and go with the home team, Mississippi Farm Bureau. Our friend Mark Wise, college basketball analyst with ESPN and the SEC Network, joins us right now to talk some college basketball, to talk March Madness and the Final Four, and give us a little historical perspective of Purdue in the Final Four. 1980, Mark, the year that I was
Richard,
born.
I'm going to date myself, but first, wasn't that bump music, wasn't that a Kenny Loggins song?
Yes.
That I was
Danger
listening
Zone.
to?
Yeah.
So in the 1980 Final Four, the song "This Is It" by Kenny Loggins, that was the song that they used in promoting the Final Four, that NBC used promoting the Final Four that week. The reason I know all of this about Purdue in 1980 is because I was one of the two young dudes on that staff that they now have about 9 guys to do. Jeff Meyer and I, we were the student assistants, the ground assistants, the video coordinator, player development assistant to the head coach. We were the coffee getters. I mean, and the story of the 1980 Final Four team at Purdue actually goes back to 79, because 79 is when the NCAA moved the tournament to 40 teams, but they limited that you could only have 2 teams from each conference. And on the last day of the regular season, Wesley Matthews for Wisconsin hits a midcourt shot to beat Magic Johnson and Michigan State, which created a 3-way tie for the Big Ten title that year between Michigan State, who went on to win the NCAA tournament against Larry Bird and company, Ohio State, and Purdue. And we were the third team. Because of the tiebreakers, we were the odd man out. Did not get to play in the tournament, even though we were Big Ten champions. Went to the NIT and lost to Indiana that in the finals by 1 point. I've kind of gotten over the shot that Butch Carter made at the end, but not really. And then the year later, we get in the NCAA tournament as a 6th seed. Now think about this. One of the host sites that year in the first and second round was Mackey Arena in West Lafayette. They allowed us to play at home. We played LaSalle in the first game, beat LaSalle, and then the higher seed, the better seed, St. John's, Louis Carnesecca, it's a road game in the NCAA tournament. You would never have that today. That's one of the controversies that the women are going through right now with their first and second round. But nonetheless, we beat St. John's, and then we go to Rupp Arena in Lexington, and we play Indiana for the second straight time in the postseason, and we beat Indiana. They had a young freshman guard. He was kind of good. Isaiah Thomas, I think, was his name, and they went on and won the NCAA
spelling,
tournament.
But yes, good player.
Yeah. They went on and won the NCAA tournament the following year in 81, and then we beat Duke, who had Gene Banks, Mike Jaminski in the regional final, and went to the Final Four in this sexy destination, that we all have in our mind about the Final Four. Well, our sexy destination was we had a sexy 60-mile bus ride from West Lafayette to Indianapolis because the Final Four was at Market Square Arena. And so there wasn't much sexy in that drive, I promise you. Went to the Final Four, lost to UCLA. We made Kiki Vandeweghe a lot of money that day. Played uphill the entire game. Finally got Joe Barry Carroll a little baby hook with about 90 seconds to go to tie. He didn't make it. We didn't have shot clock back then, so we had to foul and got beat by 5. UCLA lost to Louisville in the championship game. So a little historical perspective from the Purdue side, because you're going to read about all week long 44 years, not since 1980, and I was involved in that 1980 squad very much so.
Very, very cool. All right. I feel like I've got to bring you into the conversation that we began the show with today. So the question that I put out there, if UConn wins on Saturday and wins the national championship Monday night in 6 days, will it be the most dominant 2-year run since UCLA won 7 straight from 1967 to 1973?
I don't think there's even a debate. I think the answer to that is emphatically yes. I was involved in the 06-07, the last team to repeat at Florida, doing their radio back then.
Yeah.
They didn't have it that way. They had all 5 starters returning, even the 6th man return. So UConn has done it in a different way, and they've done it in a more dominating way. I think they've got the best 2-year run. I think they have to be in the conversation of all time. I think they've been that dominant, that good. I think one of the things that, Richard, working with me, I'm a big Ken Palm guy, and Ken Palm has his own Player of the Year formula, standings. Tristan Newton is second in the country behind Zach Edey. Now, he's way behind Zach Edey, like everybody else is. But that's the kind of talent that UConn has had this year. And in terms of, Caravan shooting the threes and Klingon operating block to block, I mean, there's no weaknesses. And I think they can beat you in more different ways than any other team in the country.
Haydad brought up 90-91 with UNLV. Obviously, they won it all in 90 and then were undefeated, wire-to-wire number 1 in 91 and got upset by Duke in the championship game. And he said, Haydad, I don't want to take the words. I think you said most dominant basketball team you've ever seen, right?
Yeah.
In my lifetime, that's the best basketball team I ever saw.
I'm not gonna argue that point, except they didn't win it. And the qualifier has to be, you have to be the back-to-back champion. I mean, to me, that's the differentiator. Otherwise, we're just comparing, different eras, and that's really hard to do. But I think the point is very valid.
Yeah, and then the other that you might I was talking about this with my friend Brett Norsworthy this afternoon. You look at that 96, 97, 98 run for Kentucky, where they won it, they finished second, and then they won it, and they did that with 2 different coaches. I mean, that was a heck of a run, but it's not back-to-back titles.
Yeah, it's not back-to-back, so it doesn't qualify. But, man, in terms of a 3-year run without winning it, I mean, the closest thing is the UCLA 7-year run, right, where they won 7 in a row.
Yeah,
that's how good they've been. And so the question becomes, well, how have they been able to pull that off? I think a couple of things. One is they have unbelievable talent. Number 2 is they have a coach who coaches on edge, and that translates to a team that plays on edge. And when you play on edge, you kind of eliminate the emotional baggage that repeating wears on a team. I can tell you, you can ask the Florida people, everybody from Billy Donovan to Al Horford to Joakim Noah, to compare the two, and they'll all tell you the second one wasn't as much fun. Well, it sure seems to me like this UConn team is still has been able to figure out a way to have fun doing it.
That's a really interesting perspective. Visiting Mark Wise, college basketball analyst, ESPN, and the SEC Network. So how does Alabama win? How does Alabama knock off UConn in the second game on Saturday in Phoenix?
Well, the good news is it's in their DNA, because all great upsets, the genesis starts at the three-point line. And they have to do it one of 2 ways. They have to be extremely efficient, which is not really their gig. In other words, they have to go 8 for 16. They're not shooting 16 threes. They're going to shoot 30. So in my mind, they got to make 12 or more. They made 11 against North Carolina. They made 16 against Clemson. You make 16 threes, you're going to win. Now, the difference is I don't know that they're going to be able to make 16. I don't even know that they're going to be able to make 10 threes against UConn. But the formula for doing it is in their DNA. And yes, they're playing better defense. That doesn't mean they're playing great defense. They're not. They are not a lockdown defensive squad. So they're going to play, the number 1 offensive efficiency team in the country. That'll be a challenge, and the only way they can keep up, in my view, is at the three-point line.
Can Grant Nelson be effective? I mean, I feel like he has been in the tournament what Alabama wanted and thought he was going to be, but wasn't all year long.
Well, he certainly was against North Carolina, wasn't he? He was the difference maker in that game. Now, he didn't play as well in the Clemson game. Again, UConn's not where they are because they slip up on their scouting report. He's a tough matchup, but he's been a very inconsistent shooter. If he shoots the ball the way he did against North Carolina, sure, they'll have a shot. But I'm a firm believer that your best player has to be your best player in these moments. And so for Alabama, Mark Sears has to be their best player.
It's going to be really interesting to see. A quick thought on the Purdue matchup in the first game. Does Cinderella's story come to an end? We've only got 45 seconds left.
Cinderella's first question to answer is, what are you going to do when Edey touches the ball? Are you going to do like Tennessee, play one-on-one and just foul the heck out of him? Or are you going to try and double sometimes and run the risk of the best three-point shooting team in the country? Cinderella, I like underdogs. I like to pick an 8-1 shot. But no, it's all about the chalk. The chalk will meet Monday night, UConn against Purdue.
And then we'll get the matchup between Zach Edey and Donovan Clingan, and that should be big fun.
Yes.
Mark, thanks so much for your time. Let's talk next week. Let's talk next Monday if we can.